The frost had not yet melted from the gravel when Adrian Harcourt called his sister a trespasser on the land where she had been born. He did it from the west steps of Harcourt Hall, before 12 tenant farmers, 2 servants, the rector, and Mr. Bell, the family solicitor. Eleanor stood below them with her late mother's brass thermometer in one gloved hand and a small leather case of grafting knives beneath her arm. Behind Adrian, the tall windows reflected a colorless November sky. Beside him, their younger brother Philip studied the gravel as if the stones deserved more consideration than she did. "A lady may enjoy flowers," Adrian said, "but that does not make her competent to manage an estate." The tenants knew who had recognized canker in the north orchard 3 years earlier. They knew who had cut the infected limbs, boiled the tools, and saved half the apple crop, while Adrian entertained a horse dealer. No one spoke. Mr. Bell unfolded the codicil to Sir Matthew Harcourt's will. The manor, farms, orchards, and income passed jointly to his sons. Eleanor received the old northern glasshouse, its attached potting shed, and the strip of ground bounded, according to the codicil, by the original garden wall. She also received every debt, rate, and repair obligation attached to those structures. A laborer had condemned the glasshouse after an iron roof rib fell during an October gale. 3/4 of its panes were cracked or missing. The furnace had not worked in 20 years. Moss filled the gutters, nettles rooted in the beds, and the eastern end leaned far enough that children dared one another to touch it and run. Philip produced a folded paper. "We will relieve you of the burden for £5. Eleanor looked at the transfer deed, but did not take it. "The iron alone is worth more." "If it can be removed without killing someone," Adrian replied. A few men laughed because he was watching them. "You have 11 shillings, I believe, and no house. Sign before pride puts you in the workhouse." Her father had left no word of affection to her, only a liability. Yet her mother had spent the last 6 years of her life in that glass house, testing winter lettuces, forcing rhubarb, and teaching Eleanor that plants disclosed what people concealed. A yellow leaf might mean wet roots rather than thirst. Frost on a pane could reveal a draft too fine for skin to feel. Growth itself was a record, if one learned to read it. Eleanor tucked the thermometer into its velvet slot. "I accept the inheritance." Adrian's smile vanished quickly enough for her to notice. By noon, her trunk stood inside the potting shed. The room measured 12 feet by 9, with a brick floor, a rusted stove, and a roof that leaked near the door. Mrs. Wren, the former under-gardener's widow, brought a straw mattress and 2 blankets without asking permission. She was nearly 60 and walked with one shoulder higher than the other after years of carrying watering cans. "Your mother kept this place warmer than the hall," she said. "Not by coal alone." "What do you mean?" Mrs. Wren glanced toward the glasshouse. "Only that she understood it." Then she pressed 3 onions into Eleanor's hand and left before Adrian's steward could see. Eleanor spent the short afternoon making one bay safe. She tied the loose door, marked the fallen rib with white cloth, and laid boards across broken glass. In the furnace room she found the boiler split, its iron door missing, and 2 lengths of heating pipe cleanly cut rather than rusted through. Someone had removed the useful metal but left a heap of worthless fittings. She recorded each fact in her mother's smallest notebook, though the remaining pages were blank. That night wind entered through 100 wounds. Eleanor slept in her cloak and woke before dawn with ice inside the water jug. When light came, the surviving panes silvered gradually. Frost feathered the western roof, crept down the side lights, and whitened the northern brick wall. Every surface froze except a tall, narrow rectangle 6 feet high and 3 feet wide. Eleanor crossed the brittle grass and pressed her palm to it. The bricks were not warm, but they were drier than the wall around them. Mortar lines continued across the shape, skillfully colored, yet a faint vertical crack described its left edge. She stepped back. The rectangle had the proportions of a glasshouse window, but the estate plan showed solid wall there, and on the other side lay only the boundary lane. At the base, she found boot prints in the mud. They were fresh, broad-heeled, and not her own. By breakfast, Adrian's offer had risen from £5 to 20. Eleanor sent the messenger back without an answer. She had learned two things before spending her first penny. The Glasshouse contained a space absent from the official plan, and her brother feared what winter had begun to show. The village of Bellwether lay a mile east of the hall, where quarry cottages descended toward a stream stained brown by peat. Eleanor walked there through sleet to price lime, glass, and stove coal. Men leaving the quarry touched their caps but avoided conversation. Its owner had announced that poor stone and falling orders might close the works by spring. Every household calculated how many meals remained between employment and hunger. At Pritchard's ironmongery, Eleanor learned that the rates amounted to £1, 14 shillings, due before Christmas. Adrian's steward had also warned tradesmen not to extend her credit. She bought only putty and returned by the north lane, studying the wall from outside. Hawthorn crowded the boundary. The frost-free rectangle should have opened onto that lane. Yet behind the thorns she found a second wall running parallel to the first, scarcely 4 feet away. Its other courses were hidden beneath ivy. The narrow interval between walls had been roofed with slate, creating a passage without visible entrance. Eleanor cut no branches. If Adrian watched the property, she would not reveal what she knew. She repaired the potting shed stove by trading 2 hours of bookkeeping for a used flue elbow. When it finally drew, she laughed once, the first sound in the room that did not belong to weather. On the second day, a quarry boy named Samuel Price appeared with a basket of broken panes. He was 13, freckled, and missing the tip of one finger. "These came from the chapel school," he said. "Mr. Cobb was throwing them away." "Why bring them here?" "Ma'am says Lady Margaret gave her broth when I was born." Lady Margaret had been Eleanor's mother. Samuel looked past her into the wreck. "Can you truly grow food in winter?" "A little, if I first grow a roof." He returned after his quarry shift with his father, Thomas, a mason who had been reduced to splitting inferior stone. Thomas examined the leaning eastern pier. Eleanor could pay nothing, so she proposed an exchange. She would teach Samuel accounts and letters 3 evenings a week, and Thomas would help shore the pier with salvaged timber. "Adrian Harcourt won't like it," Thomas said. "That is not a structural objection." Thomas smiled despite himself. Over 4 days they secured 2 bays with salvaged glass and oiled cloth. The patched interior held 7 degrees more warmth at noon. Beneath the nettle roots, Eleanor found loam her mother had mixed to drain perfectly, even after years of neglect. At dusk, Mrs. Wren brought a tin containing seeds wrapped in newspaper, spinach, hardy lettuce, parsley, and an unlabeled packet marked with Margaret's hand, "Northbed, 3rd trial." "She gave these to my husband before she died," Mrs. Wren said. "He thought she expected someone to come for them." The seeds were 12 years old. Most would be dead, but Eleanor planted 20 in shallow boxes after soaking them in warm water. She kept the boxes beside the stove and wrote their positions in the notebook. That evening, Samuel struggled through a column of quarry wages. Eleanor noticed deductions for lamp oil repeated twice. Thomas had paid them for months without reading the totals. "Figures can be walls," she told Samuel. "Someone decides which door you are allowed to see." The phrase reminded her of the concealed passage. After the Prices left, she measured the Glasshouse interior from the western plinth to the northern wall. 91 feet, 4 inches. The exterior foundation measured 97 feet. 6 feet, 8 inches had vanished, more than the space between the parallel walls. She tapped the frost-marked rectangle with the wooden handle of her knife. The top sounded solid. The center answered hollowly. Near the bottom, her blade uncovered a hairline joint shaped like a reversed hinge. Before she could examine it further, a lantern moved beyond the western panes. A man crossed the ruined bay and fled when Eleanor called out. She followed only to the door. The ground was littered with glass, and pursuit in darkness would offer him an easier victory than escape. In the morning, the seed boxes had been overturned. The unlabeled packet was gone. Eleanor salvaged 11 seeds from the brick floor. One had split, showing a pale, living center. Adrian had not sent a warning because he believed the ruin worthless. He had sent someone because Margaret Harcourt's third trial was not. Eleanor moved the surviving seeds into the potting shed and locked them in her instrument case. She then did what her brothers least expected. She opened the Glasshouse door to the village. She offered penny bundles of kindling from fallen frames, safe fragments of glass to anyone who brought a basket, and evening lessons in household accounts. In exchange, she asked for memories. Which gardeners had worked there? Where had coal entered? Had anyone seen the north wall open? Most remembered only decay. Old Mr. Vale, who had carted manure as a boy, recalled Lady Margaret marking temperatures before dawn. Mrs. Cobb remembered copper pipes running from the furnace toward the north bed, though the official heating plan showed them ending 12 feet earlier. Thomas Price remembered his father cutting pale limestone blocks for a second foundation in 1858, then being paid to keep silent. "Paid by whom?" Eleanor asked. "Your father's steward, Mr. Morrow." Morrow was dead, but his son Stephen now served Adrian. The Glasshouse began to change through small victories. Thomas straightened the eastern pier with a screwjack borrowed from the quarry. Samuel cleaned gutters. Eleanor sealed another roof bay and built a hotbed from stable manure, leaves, and straw. The temperature rose steadily as the mixture fermented. Into shallow drills she sowed spinach and lettuce. Within 6 days, green hooks emerged from the soil. The north bed seeds behaved differently. Of the 11, 9 germinated, producing thick red stems and paired leaves unlike common spinach. Eleanor recognized a beet relative, but not the variety. Her mother's notebook contained no botanical description, only columns of winter temperatures followed by symbols, a circle, a line, and a small square. On the 12th evening, Eleanor scraped plaster from the frost-marked rectangle. Beneath it lay not ordinary brick, but tiles set face inward. Each tile carried a shallow groove. Together, the grooves formed part of a diagram, hidden because the tiles had been reversed during construction. She dared remove only one. Behind it was a cavity lined with cork and tarred felt. A thin copper tube descended through the dark. The tube was neither a water pipe nor a gas line. Her mother had used similar capillary tubes in a solar thermometer, where warming liquid moved an indicator. Eleanor traced it downward until it vanished under the north bed. The next morning, Stephen Morrow arrived with a constable and a notice declaring the eastern structure unsafe. No one could enter until repairs were certified by Adrian's appointed surveyor. "The condemned section is cordoned," Eleanor said. "The western bays are sound." Morrow's gaze traveled directly to the disturbed tile. "You have no authority to alter the boundary wall." "It belongs to me under the codicil." "Only to the original garden wall." "Then perhaps you will identify which wall that phrase means." His expression tightened. He nailed the notice to the door and left the constable to clear out Samuel and Thomas. Eleanor waited until they had gone. Then she compared the codicil with the copied estate plan. The boundary line had been inked in heavy black, but beneath it she could see a paler red mark extending beyond the north wall. Someone had drawn the official boundary over an earlier one. Her inheritance was not merely a ruined glasshouse. It was a dispute measured in 6 missing feet, and the proof might be built into the wall her brothers forbade her to touch. Adrian's surveyor, Mr. Rusk, declared the entire structure dangerous without taking a single measurement. When Eleanor challenged him, he carelessly referred to the old propagation room beyond the wall, then denied knowing of it. His slip supplied a name to the missing space and confirmed that Adrian had briefed him before the inspection. Eleanor could not legally defy the notice, so she worked outside. Thomas cleared ivy from the second wall while remaining in the public lane. Beneath it they found dressed limestone rather than brick, with 3 low vents sealed by slate. One vent exhaled faint warmth at midday, although the sky remained overcast. Samuel crawled no farther than his shoulders into another and drew out dry walnut shells. "Rats," Thomas said. Eleanor examined the shells. Each had been split cleanly along the seam, not gnawed. A dormouse might do that, but no animal explained the scent of damp earth and rosemary moving through the vent. She returned after sunset with a mirror and lantern. Angling the light through the opening, she saw whitewashed masonry, copper mesh, and the curved edge of a glazed earthenware pipe. The passage was built as an insulated cavity. Warm air rising from below had kept the hidden tiles dry and melted the frost. Her mother's symbols now seemed less like plant records and more like operating instructions. Circle, line, square. Vent, pipe, chamber. Mrs. Wren finally admitted that Margaret had called the northern section the Winter Wall. She had designed it after the hungry winter of 1855, when quarry families lived on oats and turnips. She believed a glasshouse could store summer heat underground and use it to protect food crops with very little coal. Sir Matthew mocked the expense. After Margaret's death, he sealed her papers and dismissed the gardeners. "Why did she hide it?" Eleanor asked. "She didn't at first. Then Mr. Morrow began visiting at night. Your mother said men who could not understand a thing still knew how to sell it." Within the instrument case, one north bed seedling had unfolded a third leaf. Its red stem matched a watercolor Eleanor remembered from childhood, a hardy leaf beat her mother had crossed for cold resistance. Margaret's lost design was not one discovery but two. A low-coal growing system and crops bred to thrive within it. That made Adrian's interest plain. Quarry closure would make land and labor cheap. A winter-growing patent or saleable design could rescue the estate without acknowledging the woman who created it. At the county newspaper office, Eleanor found an 1859 notice announcing Margaret's novel thermal cultivation wall for the Bellwether Relief Committee. The demonstration had been cancelled, and a later report claimed the apparatus was dismantled. It had instead been erased from the plan. When Eleanor returned at dusk, smoke rolled from the potting shed. Thomas and Samuel were beating flames from the roof with wet sacks. Oily waste had been stuffed beneath the door. Her mattress burned, the instrument case lay open, and every seedling was gone. Samuel had seen Morrow's cart nearby, but that proved nothing. Adrian arrived before the embers cooled and offered Eleanor a room at the hall if she signed the transfer. She refused. By morning he had spread the claim that her experimental heating caused the fire and endangered Samuel. Thomas was threatened with dismissal, her pupils vanished, and for the first time Eleanor considered surrendering the glasshouse for £20. Samuel arrived after dark, carrying one scorched seedling in a cracked teacup. He had hidden it when the smoke began. "Ma'am says I'm not to come again," he said, "but I thought this belonged here." The little plant leaned toward the lamp. 2 leaves burned away and one still green. Eleanor understood then that keeping the glasshouse for pride would be foolish. Keeping it so that Samuel's family might eat after the quarry closed was something else. She cut the dead leaves, watered the roots, and told him to obey his mother. Then she wrote to every member named in the old Bellwether Relief Committee. Only one answered. Miss Beatrice Shaw, 81, lived in York with a niece and remembered Margaret well. She could not travel, but she enclosed a copy of committee minutes preserved among her papers. The minutes recorded approval for Margaret to build a trial wall on land donated in perpetual use for the Relief Cultivation Project. The donated strip measured 6 feet 8 inches north of the old garden boundary. Sir Matthew had witnessed the agreement. The original deed, however, had never been registered separately. Without it, the minutes proved intent but not ownership. Eleanor showed the copy to Mr. Bell. The solicitor read it twice, then closed his office door. "Your father instructed me that the black boundary line was final," he said. "Did you see the earlier deed?" "No." "Did he tell you my mother built the propagation room?" Mr. Bell's silence was answer enough. He warned that Adrian planned to petition for demolition immediately after the unpaid rates deadline. If the structure were removed, the physical evidence of the older boundary might disappear. Eleanor had 9 days. She sold her mother's silver-backed hairbrush for £1, paid Mr. Pritchard, and purchased a day's labor from Thomas openly rather than accepting charity. Together they removed loose ivy and documented every stone in the public-facing wall. A carved survey mark appeared beneath the roots, BRC 1858, for Bellwether Relief Committee. Beside it, a narrow iron plate carried 3 shapes: circle, line, square. The plate slid only when warmed. Eleanor held a kettle against it, remembering how her mother's systems used temperature rather than force. Metal expanded, a catch released. The plate opened onto a socket containing 3 control rods. Circle opened the upper vent, line diverted air through the earthenware pipe, square released a counterweighted shutter behind the frost-marked tiles. Eleanor operated them in sequence. Inside the glasshouse, the tall rectangle moved inward half an inch. The supposed wall was a door. They entered at noon with Mr. Bell, the rector, Mrs. Wren, and 2 quarrymen as witnesses. The door opened into the narrow, insulated passage Eleanor had glimpsed through the vent. Beyond it, steps descended beneath the north bed into a chamber built from pale limestone. Its ceiling was vaulted, its shelves slate, and its air dry. Earthenware ducts ran through a bed of fist-sized stones. At the southern end stood a manual fan, connected by chain to a small exterior wind vane. Even after 20 years, the mechanism turned reluctantly when Thomas oiled it. The chamber was not a treasure vault. It was a heat store. Summer air from the glasshouse had once been drawn downward through the stones, warming them. In winter, the airflow reversed, returning stored heat through the wall cavity. A second circuit collected compost heat from covered pits. Copper indicators passed through the hidden tiles, so Margaret could read temperatures without opening the chamber. Eleanor felt a fierce tenderness at the economy of it. Her mother had built no miracle, only a careful system using stone, air, decay, and time. It had been ignored because its maker was a woman, and because coal had once seemed cheap. On the slate shelves lay sealed ceramic jars. Most contained ruined seed, but 3 were packed in charcoal and waxed cloth. Their labels named winter beet, compact kale, and a pale forcing bean, each followed by trial numbers. Beside them rested copper printing plates illustrating the ducts, controls, and bed construction. Mr. Bell found a japanned box behind the plates. It held Margaret's laboratory register, correspondence with 2 agricultural societies, receipts naming local craftsmen, and a folded parchment bearing Sir Matthew's seal. The deed conveyed the 6-foot strip to trustees of the Bellwether Relief Committee and granted Margaret lifetime direction of the experimental works. After her death, control was to pass to the trained cultivator she shall nominate in her register. The final page of the register named Eleanor. It did not give her the land personally. It made her steward of a charitable trust. Adrian could neither purchase it from her nor absorb it into the estate. The codicil's phrase, "original garden wall," placed her inherited glasshouse against the trust boundary, while the concealed chamber and winter wall belonged to the committee's surviving purpose. "This can defeat demolition," Mr. Bell said, "if the seal and witnesses are authenticated." Mrs. Wren pointed to the final shelf. A shallow drawer stood open and empty. Dust showed that it had recently held a rectangular bundle. The seedling theft had been a diversion. Someone had entered by another route and taken whatever papers Margaret considered most important. A cold draft led Eleanor to a low service door at the chamber's western end. Its outer lock had been freshly scratched. The passage emerged beneath a loose stone in the Harcourt orchard, on Adrian's land. Adrian possessed incomplete knowledge. He had found the rear entrance but not understood the heat controls or the legal chain. What he stole might be the missing proof connecting the trust to its intended public use. Eleanor copied every page. Mr. Bell took the deed to York for authentication. The rector secured the committee minutes, and quarrymen guarded both entrances. Morrow was soon caught trying to sell the stolen seeds, weakening Adrian's story. Eleanor then repaired the fan chain, cleared 2 ducts, and built a fresh compost pit. Overnight, the protected bed rose 4 degrees without coal, proving the system still had practical value. Adrian answered with an injunction. He claimed the parchment was fabricated, the committee dissolved, and Eleanor's repairs a public hazard. A hearing was set at the magistrate's assembly room before Christmas Eve, 2 days after the rate's deadline. He expected debt to remove her before evidence could be heard. The empty drawer haunted Eleanor. Its width matched a folio, not a deed. In Margaret's register, several pages referred to comparative yield sheets sent under seal. Those sheets would prove the winter crops and heat wall had worked, establishing value and purpose. Without them, Adrian could portray the chamber as an abandoned private experiment. Eleanor reconsidered the clues. The cleanly opened walnut shells, rosemary scent, warm vent, and recently moved drawer. Someone had maintained the chamber after Margaret's death. Not Adrian. He had needed Morrow to steal the seed. The caretaker used the air passage quietly and oiled the mechanism with rosemary to repel mice. Mrs. Wren's late husband had been undergardener. Eleanor visited his grave, then searched their cottage only after asking permission. In the loft, beneath a beekeeping veil, she found a bottle of rosemary oil and a wooden key shaped for the chamber's rear latch. Mrs. Wren sat down heavily. William promised your mother. Once a month, at night he turned the fan and checked the jars. After his lungs failed, I did it. I stopped last winter because I could no longer move the orchard stone. Why did you not tell me? Your father threatened to evict us if the committee was spoken of. When he died, Adrian repeated the warning. She had removed the yield folio before Sir Matthew sealed the room, believing it safer apart from the deed. When Eleanor arrived, Mrs. Wren concealed it again, uncertain whether Sir Matthew's daughter sought profit or public relief. Where is it now? Eleanor asked. Mrs. Wren looked toward the window. Where your mother taught you to read winter. They returned to the Glasshouse. In the north bed, beneath the stone bearing Margaret's circle symbol, lay a lead-lined seed drawer. The folio inside was dry. It contained 12 years of crop weights, coal consumption, weather readings, and signed distributions to 46 quarry households. The final sheet compared the system with a conventional heated house. Margaret's wall had produced nearly 2/3 of the winter greens, using less than 1/5 of the coal. At the bottom, William Wren and 2 committee members had witnessed Margaret's nomination of Eleanor. One surviving witness was Miss Shaw. The legal chain was complete, but Eleanor's relief lasted minutes. A quarry boy came running from the hall. Adrian had ordered laborers to pull down the orchard wall at dawn, claiming loose stones threatened the lane. Demolition would bury the rear entrance and could collapse the chamber before the hearing. The injunction forbade Eleanor from altering the disputed structure. It did not authorize Adrian to destroy trust property. Mr. Bell was still returning from York. The constable answered to the magistrate who dined with Adrian. Eleanor had documents but no immediate power. So she chose witnesses. Before sunrise, the bell of the chapel school rang as if for fire. Families gathered in the lane. Eleanor posted copies of the committee minutes, the crop distributions, and the survey drawing on the school door. She explained exactly what lay below the wall and what demolition might destroy. She promised no fortune. She described a repaired glasshouse producing hardy greens, seedlings, and training, if the village chose to defend its own trust. Thomas Price stood at the orchard stone. Mrs. Wren stood beside him with Margaret's register. Samuel held the rescued seedling, now carrying 2 new leaves. When Adrian's laborers arrived, they found 60 people in the lane, not rioting, merely observing. Quarry foreman Cobb came last. He read his grandmother's name on the 1860 distribution sheet and joined the witnesses. Adrian appeared on horseback, furious at the quietness he could not call disorder. Move them. They are on a public lane, Eleanor said. Before Morrow could strike the wall, the constable arrived with Mr. Bell, authentication of the seal, Miss Shaw's affidavit, and a warrant concerning the fire. Morrow confessed that Adrian paid him to steal Margaret's papers and frighten Eleanor into signing. Rusk then surrendered Adrian's written order to condemn every bay regardless of its actual condition. The flaw that defeated Adrian was not ignorance, but certainty that every dependent man would remain bought. Once one spoke, the others protected themselves with the truth. The magistrates blocked demolition, recognized the trust deed pending confirmation, and accepted Eleanor as its nominated director. Adrian was barred from the disputed boundary, while Morrow's testimony exposed his conspiracy and forced him to resign control of the estate. Eleanor still owed the rates. Justice did not erase arithmetic. On the afternoon before seizure, 43 quarry families brought enough pennies and shillings to pay nearly all the rates. Philip arrived at dusk with the missing 3 shillings, and admitted that although he had altered nothing, he had concealed much. "That is not innocence," Eleanor said. "I know." She accepted the money only after recording it as repayment for 6 years of unpaid orchard work. Philip signed the entry. It was a small beginning, not forgiveness. Winter did not transform the ruin overnight. Eleanor screened off the broken eastern bays and restored only what subscriptions, produce sales, and paid village labor could support. By February, rows of winter beets stood beneath patched glass. The leaves were dark green, their stems crimson. Eleanor sold half at cost and distributed half through the chapel school according to household need, just as Margaret had done. The compact kale germinated unevenly. The forcing bean failed entirely. She recorded failure beside success because honest knowledge had been the legacy her mother intended. During spring, the quarry reduced its workforce but did not close. Men without shifts rebuilt the eastern foundation for wages. Women trained in seed selection and accounts, and Samuel learned to manage the temperature controls. Over 3 years, the village restored the roof, fan, ducts, and stone heat store. The trust sold hardy seed and plans at fair prices, requiring every purchaser to credit Margaret and share improvements. Adrian was convicted of procuring arson and falsifying estate instructions. He avoided transportation but served a prison term and lost control of Harcourt Hall. Creditors sold part of his hunting land. Philip retained a modest tenancy after repaying money taken from Eleanor's orchard work and giving evidence about the altered boundary plan. He and Eleanor spoke rarely, carefully, without pretending childhood could be restored like ironwork. Mrs. Wren kept the seed register, Thomas supervised masonry, and Cobb managed the quarry contracts. At 19, Samuel earned an engineering scholarship with Margaret's diagrams and Eleanor's temperature tables. The potting shed became Eleanor's home by degrees. A sound roof, a bedstead, shelves, curtains, and a blue door Samuel painted badly and repainted well. On the 5th anniversary of the hearing, the first hard frost arrived before dawn. Eleanor walked alone through the glasshouse with her mother's brass thermometer. Outside, every surviving old pane whitened. Inside, rows of beet and parsley held their color beneath the pale glass. Warm air rose quietly through the restored winter wall. The tall rectangle on the north side remained visible, no longer disguised. They had glazed its inner face and mounted the reverse tiles beside it, so visitors could see both the concealed diagram and the passage beyond. Children called it the frost door. Eleanor pressed her hand to the clear pane. Once, the absence of frost had shown her where a window had been stolen from the plan. Now the same clear shape framed the lit chamber, the turning fan, and Samuel's latest improvements marked in white chalk. It revealed no treasure, only work made visible and knowledge kept in use. Beyond the glass, quarry families crossed the lane carrying baskets for the morning distribution. Mrs. Wren unlocked the seed cabinet. Thomas complained cheerfully about a cracked gutter. The ruined house filled with voices before sunrise. Eleanor had been given the part of Harcourt no one valued. By learning exactly why it had survived, she had made it impossible for them to call either the place or its keeper worthless again.